Welcome back. I hope you had a good break after the midterm. And now we're going to jump right in to the second half of the course, and we'll cover one of the most difficult topics of beginning Greek, and that is the Greek participle. What I want to do first is go over the introduction in your textbook, chapter 26, on the participle. The Greek participle is what we call a verbal noun or verbal adjective. Grammatically, it has components that resemble a verb, and grammatically, it has components that resemble a noun. So when you parse the participle, you'll be parsing it by case, number, and gender. So this is the noun part. And then you'll also be parsing it by tense, voice, mood, and that's the verb part. And so if I were to just give a quick example, pistou antes, you'll learn this for this module. But if I were to parse that, hopefully what you'll see is that third declension, nominative, plural, masculine ending, and then we'll learn that the stem to which this ending is attached identifies it as a present active participle. So the entire parsing, there's 6 elements to the parsing components, plus the lexical form, plus the translation. And so this would be pistou antes would be a nominative, plural, masculine present active participle from pisteuo. And for a rough translation, we're going to translate it as the ones who are believing. We're going to translate this substantively. We'll go over how to translate the participle a little bit later. But right now, let's go on to section 2. What are the 2 basic types of participles? There is what we call an adjectival participle, and the second one is adverbial. But let's go over the adjectival participle first. As the name indicates, an adjectival participle is a participle that modifies the noun, or basically it functions like an adjective. And when it modifies a noun, it acts adjectively. It'll agree with the noun it modifies in case, number, and gender. And usually what happens then is that since this is a verbal noun or verbal adjective, the participle is translated as a relative clause that modifies the noun in which it matches in case, number, and gender. So let's give a quick example here. So in this sentence, hoi anthropoi pistou antes ton onomon to Jesu Jesusen. If we look at this, the subject of the sentence is this hoi anthropoi, or the people or the men. And the verb is Jesusen. They will live. All right. So the men will live is what we call the core or kernel sentence. This is the core kernel sentence. This is the main sentence. And this phrase is what's modifying the men. And pistou antes, and you'll learn to recognize the forms once we go over it. But if anthropoi is nominative, masculine, plural, this form also is nominative, masculine, plural. It matches in case, number, and gender with anthropoi. And the way this is translated, roughly, is believing the name of Jesus. So pistou antes, ta'anama's name to Jesu is Jesus. So this is believing in the name of Jesus. But it's modifying anthropoi. And so the way we often translate adjectival participles, it's as a relative clause. So the men who are believing in the name of Jesus will or shall live. That's the translation. And then the second type of participle is what we call the adverbial participle. And this modifies the verb, or acts like an adverb. In Greek, the adverbial participle modifies the verb of the sentence rather than a noun. And so in this example, pistou antes, this is the participle, this ha here, what or the thing that Jesus said to them. And then you have hoi mathetai exelthon. So the main sentence is the disciples went out. So exelthon being went out. This is the subject. This is the verb. And then you have this phrase, pistuantes ha Jesus apen Jesu. Let me clear that up a little bit. And the way, if we translate this adverbally, we can translate this as while believing what Jesus said to them, or while they were believing what Jesus said to them, the disciples departed or went out. So this is an example of an adverbial participle. We'll go over this the adverbial participle and its translation in a bit. Don't worry if some of this is a little bit confusing in the beginning. Just track with the video, and remember, this is an overview. So you're going to learn all the things that we're going over in chapter 26 piece by piece as we go through the modules after this week's module. The next section is about time of the participle. And that's actually probably one of the most difficult things to understand conceptually about how the participle works. The participle is a non-indicative mood. So far, up until the midterm, you've been learning indicative moods. That means the present, the future, the imperfect, the aorist, and the perfect tenses all have a built-in sense of time because they're in the indicative mood. So the indicative mood forms of the verb have a built-in sense of time. And that actually makes it easy to translate because you had a midterm on the indicative mood, and all these forms had a built-in sense of time. But the participle does not. The participle does not have a built-in temporal element. The participle emphasizes the kind of action, but the time of action depends on the finite verb. So I wanted to give a couple examples. So here, elthe, this is he went. And then we have the participle praying. Now, because he went is past time, and the way this present participle is being used is that the time of the participle and the time of the main verb are supposed to be simultaneous. It's supposed to be simultaneous time. That's why we translate this as while, to show some form of, in our translation, that we know that the action of the participle happens at the same time as the action of the main verb. So if the main verb is past, he went, then you want to translate the present participle as something in past time. And since present participles are a continuous kind of participle, and we'll go over that in chapter 27. I'm just kind of giving an overview. That's why we're translating as while he was praying, he went. Now notice this one, same verb. Okay, so instead of he went, this is the present tense, he goes, and then we have the same participle, praying. And so because goes is in present time, look at how he translated a participle here. The participle action is happening simultaneously as the main verb. So he goes. And you don't want to translate this as while he will be going, or while he was praying, or while he will be praying. You want it the same time as the main verb. So he goes while he is praying. Erkatai, prosukamenos, is present time. This is present. So if this is translated present time, he goes, then praying has to be translated present time while he is praying. The last section is about the kinds of participles. And we're going to learn for this chapter 27 the forms of the present participle. And what's being emphasized in the present participle is the kind of action. It's continuous. And so you could translate, for example, with praying, is praying, will be praying, or was praying. The whole emphasis here is that the time is, will be, or was is going to be dependent on what main verb prosoukomenos is attached to, and what you're trying to translate with the present participle is the fact that it's continuous. Praying, it's a process. Whereas with the aorist participle, you're going to learn to translate this a different way, where the undefined aspect of the participle is being emphasized. And then with the perfect participle, which will be the last kind of participle we'll be learning several modules in, its kind of action is stative. And so the stative participle will also be translated different way. And we'll go over that once we get to those modules. But for this module, we wanted to introduce the participle, and now we're going to go into chapter 27.